Hey everyone, Matt with Triple Act Adventures. Thank you for joining me this week. I appreciate all your guys' likes and follows. Let's knock this right out of the beginning. If you haven't already, please click that subscribe button, click the like, click that notification bell, and if you're following along during this video and you have any questions or comments, please throw them below. Without further ado, let's get to this week's video. So if you're not familiar with my channel and my vehicle, I have a Lexus GX460 that I have built out for full expedition / overland travel. I'll throw a picture up here on the screen. Otherwise, you can also check out my other videos on my channel, including my build video, which I'll put a link in the top right for you guys to watch now or at a further time. This vehicle has been pretty muchly an overland, a full build, and it stays that full build with very little amount of equipment going in and out of it for a significant portion of its life, especially in my ownership. Well, I should mention it was stock before I bought it. I built it out. But either way, it has been in my ownership and it has been used as an overland expedition vehicle the entire time outside of daily driving. This vehicle has been everywhere from the northern Maine woods, Canadian border, all the way down to Johnson Valley in California. This vehicle has seen everything. It's seen the Ozark Adventure Route. It has had water over the hood. It's been through deep mud. It's been through some light rock crawling. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I'm like some crazy rock crawling Jeep type of guy. I think it's cool, but I wouldn't do it in my overland vehicle. I'd probably have a dedicated vehicle. Doesn't matter. My point though is that this vehicle has seen everything, kind of done everything, and due to that, I have had a lot of things that have broken on the vehicle, so I wanted to cover that today. I will go over all of this in sections, and I will put those categories / sections below so that you guys can skip around if you wanted to, or if you want to reference it back in the future, you can do that as well. I'm hoping that this video will be useful for people that already own a Lexus GX460 or maybe are in the market for a used one, because the market on these, especially some of the older ones with slightly higher mileage, are becoming really obtainable, and they are a phenomenal platform to build on. So as I go through this list, guys, I will go through all the things that I've had to fix. I will also mention if those are common problems with this vehicle / chassis or whatever that part is that broke. I will also mention if it is something that was just a self-inflicted thing. You'll see, but there are certain things that were self-inflicted breaks. But I should mention, if it was self-inflicted, there's probably a reason for it, and it most likely means that there's an inherent weak point in that part, or maybe the location it's in, or something like that. So I'll cover all that as we go through. That way you guys kind of have a feeling of, even if it's a stock vehicle, hey, this is a common problem on these at certain mileage intervals. Look out for that. If you're buying one, or even if you own one. And then also, hey, if you're going to be building a crazy vehicle, these are common problems you're going to have as well. So I hope you guys find this useful. If you do, please throw some comments below. Like I always mention too, I really appreciate your guys' support. If you guys find this video useful, please hit that like button, click subscribe, hit that notification bell, and let's keep on going here. So first category, I wanted to start with this. I don't know why I decided to start with this category, but we're going to anyway. The engine and things, accessories, and anything associated with the engine. So I've had a few things that I'll try to go over this in kind of order of the way they kind of had issues in my case scenario. So the first one was the water pump. My front water pump is mounted on the front of the engine about midway down, and it started to have some leaking. I noticed it one time. I had a few drips on my skid plate when I took it off to do an oil change, and I looked up with a light, and I realized there was some coolant around that area. So I went ahead and did that. Very easy job to do. You do have to remove a bunch of stuff, but it's definitely something, if you're mechanic inclined, you can do it yourself. Of course, you can have a shop do it as well. In my case scenario, that ended up leaking / going bad at about 120,000 miles. I don't remember if I mentioned in the beginning of the video, I now have about 170,000 miles on this vehicle total, just to give you guys a reference point. Now, when I did that job, I decided while I had everything apart to put a new engine belt on it. It's a singular belt on this engine. It doesn't have two belts. I did a new tensioner and a new idler pulley. Tensioners and idler pulleys are kind of known once you get over 100,000 miles, depending on the use case, especially if you're in a lot of off-road conditions. Those can wear out, but that's pretty common with any engine. But I went ahead and did it when I did the water pump because you already have everything apart, might as well. Now, the next thing that ended up going on my vehicle, which was actually a little bit more towards 135-ish, I think. I'd have to look at my receipts, but this was the valley plate leak. This is a really common problem with the 1UR-FE engine. What that is down inside where the intake manifold kind of is, there's coolant passageways in there, and they call it the valley of the engine. For lack of better terms, the RTV or the sealant around that will, due to all the heat cycles over time, it ends up just breaking down. You end up getting some coolant leaks, and coolant will end up kind of leaking out slightly. It's not like a pouring leak, but it ends up building up in that valley, and typically, due to the tilt of the way the engine's in the vehicle, it will typically leak down the back of the engine, down the bell housing on the transmission. The most common way to determine if you do have that leak is to look at underneath the vehicle around the transmission bell housing, and you will see dried up coolant, that pink dried up color coming down that. It is very common on these engines. It is a very low part replacement, but very high labor replacement. I had a shop do mine. I looked at the online, I actually looked at the Lexus field manual on it, and I was like, I don't want to bother doing that. It was a lot of work. So I paid a shop to do that. Like I said, mine was around that 130, 140,000 mark, but it's super common. So that's one you really guys want to look out for. Obviously, if you were to ignore that for a long period of time, you could have some coolant leaks, which would cause overheating and catastrophic failure if it got that far. Now, talking about coolant leaks and stuff, I did just recently actually, so about 165,000 miles, my radiator started to leak. This is common due to the design of the radiator on these vehicles from the factory. It is an aluminum radiator on the inside, but it has plastic end tanks. And as you can imagine, over hundreds of thousands of miles of heat cycles, those end tanks start to get weak. It will start to seep typically right where they seam together with the aluminum fins. I went ahead and replaced it with a CSF race radiator, which is a full aluminum one. It fits in the factory location. It's a little bit wider, has higher performance. So if that does happen to you guys, I do recommend you guys end up going and getting a full aluminum radiator. They fit in the same location, and price-wise, compared to the OEM, not that much more expensive. Of course, while I did that job, I also put brand new hoses on it. That's just recommended. You could also do a thermostat if you wanted to at that time. I didn't on mine, but you could. So that kind of covers the coolant stuff, those three things there. Next thing I had to do, which I would say this is common on any engine, especially with high mileage, I did have an ignition coil go on mine. Vehicle was driving nice. All of a sudden one day I had a check engine light flashing, which typically means a misfire, pulled the codes, found out I had an ignition coil that had gone bad. I only replaced one. Everybody has their own opinion on that. I determined exactly which one it was, replaced that one, and I've had no issues, and that was 15,000 plus miles ago. So I don't know, I wanted to include that because I wanted to be transparent on all the things I've had to do on the vehicle, but I don't want to say there's a problem with the ignition coil, it's just it's high mileage, you know. The last thing on here that I wanted to add on, I'll add this as kind of a bonus on the engine. I have not had to fix this yet, but I know it's a problem and I will have to. At higher mileage on these, it is pretty common that the valve covers and the spark plug tube seals will start to leak or seep oil. In my case, I'm getting a very slight amount of oil that is starting to kind of seep out of the valve covers. I'm also getting a little bit of oil that's going down to into the spark plug tube. I really should do that because it can kind of mess with the way your firing, efficiency is on the engine. So it's something I know I need to do. Really, the only way to find out is to inspect around the valve covers on the engine and also pull a spark plug out, or really all of them, and see if you have any oil buildup on the threads and stuff like that of your spark plugs. So that covers the engine, guys. Next one I'm going to go into, this one will be the transmission category. Now, I have not had to replace anything yet, knock on wood. I do know that I'm going to have to at some point. Like I said, I'm at 170,000 miles, and my vehicle is very heavy. I don't like advertising the number that it is because it's very heavy, but it is a full-time overland rig. I really just I load the fridge and a few camping gear in the back, but drawers, the whole build you saw, it's like that all the time. And so it sees a lot of rough use. It's had a lot of wheeling. It's had all that stuff, all the stuff you guys imagine a vehicle in an overland or an expedition travel. That transmission's taken all that. So my transmission has a little bit of rough shifts. You can kind of feel the torque converters starting to go. This is unfortunately a relatively common problem on these, especially as they've been going up in age. A lot of people on the forums, online, the Facebook groups have started to mention their GX460s having some transmission issues. So like I said, I haven't had to replace anything yet, but I have a feeling, I hate to say it, but unfortunately I think in probably the next 50,000 miles, I'm probably going to either have to do a rebuilt transmission or have mine rebuilt. We'll see what direction we go or how long it lasts. Just one note on that, guys. If you have a 2010 to a 2011, there was a known issue with the valve bodies. Specifically, there was a solenoid in that valve body that would allow pressure blow-by and would cause some really erratic shifting. I believe there was a service bulletin on that to get that repaired if it was under warranty. Obviously, they aren't anymore. But the 2010s and 11s were known for that. It seems to be from 12 and up, they had eradicated that issue, maybe with a new part or whatever the service bulletin was. Just a heads up on that. What else? Let's go into the next category. So the next category is going to be suspension and steering. So this one is a lot of things that are self-inflicted and probably due to heavy wheeling and stuff like that. So one of the common issues on these vehicles, even in stock form though, is all of the bushings associated with the KDSS system. Now, if you're not familiar with that, I've done some other videos on that, and there's a lot of other videos online. Simply put though, the KDSS system is the sway bar system. So there are bushings both where the clamps mount to the bar and then also where the bars mount on the front to the lower control arms. I've had to replace all the bushings on that system multiple times. Now, like I said, I do a lot of wheeling, whether that's washboard roads or articulations, moguls, all that stuff, including, of course, going through mud holes and silty water, and it gets used pretty bad. It's rough conditions. So use, grain of salt, but that system, due to the hydraulic nature of those sway bars, there is a lot of force on those bushings and they do wear out pretty quick. So that is one thing to keep an eye on. I've seen a lot of people online will have kind of like these weird clunking issues that are inconsistent, specifically in the front. And a lot of times people are trying to diagnose other things, come to find out the bushings were just torn or ripped on the KDSS system. So keep an eye out on those. If I had to put a mileage interval, I would say if you use it in the same use case I do, I would check them every like 30,000 miles maybe, every 2 years maybe, keep an eye on them. It's probably a better idea to look at them even once a year, do a nice check over on your rig before you do that stuff, but that's pretty common. Another thing, talking about bushings, the lower control arm bushings on these are really known for failing, especially at those higher mileage intervals. A lot of that is, I think, due to us that all the people that modify these vehicles, we put big tires on them, we wheel them, you know, we're pushing the alignment outside of the factory specs in favor of fitting larger tires. All of that is putting more force on those factory rubber bushings. I have since, if you guys didn't know, I have since gone to Super Pro's double offset bushings on the bottom lower control arms, and those use a poly bushing that actually have a lifetime warranty. And I will tell you guys, quick shout out to Super Pro. I had an issue with them and they replaced the entire control arm. I was actually expecting them to send out bushings, but they replaced the entire control arm, like no questions asked. They do say there's a lifetime warranty on their bushings under normal use cases, and they're great. Their customer service was awesome. But that's one thing to look out for, guys. Lower control arm bushings are pretty known on these. Associated to that lower control arm, keep an eye on the ball joint. That lower ball joint can get some play, especially if you do a lot of wheeling. Another thing to keep in mind on that too is your upper control arm bushings, guys. The upper control arm bushings, especially the factory arms, can get some rips and tears in the bushing. The factory rubber bushing, when you tighten that upper control arm, you have to tighten it at ride height. And as you're articulating, that rubber bushing is actually, because the bolt is tight at ride height, every time that bushing goes, the bolt is actually, the inside of the bushing is stagnant and the outside of the bushing is stagnant. So the rubber in between is getting ripped and torn every time the suspension cycles. So there's pros and cons to all that. I could go into a whole nother video on different bushings of what's good and what's not, but that is a common problem. Aftermarket bushings with poly and all that stuff can also have issues. So these are small little things, guys. Like I said, this is kind of just common problems, especially with modified vehicles, but it's worth noting that. One other thing I threw in this category, even though it's not technically steering or suspension, is the body mounts. So I had noticed that all of my body mounts bushings, so the Lexus GX460 is a body on frame vehicle, meaning it actually has a full frame and then a body that is literally just plopped down on the frame and bolted on. Between those bolt-on sections are large rubber bushings. All of mine had worn out and kind of collapsed, and I had to replace all those. I have a video on my YouTube. If I remember, I'll put a link to the top right for you guys to watch that video. Very easy to do in your driveway with just some basic jack and tools. I did have to do those, and I want to give a huge recommendation to anybody. If you plan on modifying your Lexus GX460, especially if it's older, I would say anything older than 60,000 miles on it, just replace those body mount bushings before you put your bumpers on. And the reason why is when you put aftermarket bumpers or sliders on your vehicle, you have to cut the factory steps, you have to cut the rear and front bumper in order to fit those aftermarket bumpers. And if your body mount bushings are worn, all of your cuts are going to end up being, nice, the right amount of spacing to the bumper. And as soon as you go to replace those bushings, the body will now be higher and all of your gaps are going to be huge. So highly recommend, pro tip, learn from my mistake. Replace all your body mount bushings right away. If you're maybe 60,000 miles or above, at least inspect them. Just replace them. They're cheap. It was like $200 something for the entire kit. So just replace all your bushings, then go do your bumpers. But that's kind of a common problem, and this is true on any body on frame vehicle on the market, so I'm not picking on the Lexus, but like I said, I wanted to be transparent on all the things that I've had to do. And if you guys see me looking down, it's because I have a list. Now, part of the steering system, I did just recently have to replace my power steering rack. I was starting to have weird feedback on the trails, so I was getting this like dunk, 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 dunk chatter through the steering, and for a while I actually thought it was the steering link that goes down to the box, but I double checked it, made sure there was no play in it, and there wasn't. It was rusty, but there was no play. And after after a lot of inspection, I ended up finding out that the power steering rack actually had play inside it. It hadn't started leaking yet, but it had play inside the rack. So unfortunately, we did have to replace that. I had a shop do it because I watched videos online and I was like, I don't want to do this in my driveway. I mean, it could be done, but it's a bear of a job. So I ended up doing that, and tying into that, all pun intended, we did have to do the tie rods. On my specific build, I ended up upgrading my tie rods. It's a Toyo steering, makes a kit, so you actually ream out your, I can't think of the term now, your spindles to a larger, to fit a larger tie rod, and I'm running tie rods off of a 100 series Land Cruiser, and then the inner tie rods are custom machined from like a Tundra. So the pros to that kit is you're getting a lot stronger steering system without going like a full aftermarket custom rack and all that stuff. The downsides to that system is, well, one, you either need to ream out your spindles or have them reamed out. And then also the inner tie rods are a custom tie rod. In my case, I just ordered an extra set of inners, and the outer tie rods are just from a 100 series Land Cruiser. You can get those anywhere in the world, or of course order a second set, just in case. So steering is a big problem on these, especially when you go to large tires. I would say if you're on a more of the factory size and you're just bombing around town, or even light wheeling with like a slightly more aggressive tire, you're probably not gonna have any problems. But as you guys know, I'm running 35s on mine, and if you wheel, I don't want to say aggressively, but it's a lot of weight and a lot of stress on that rack. So that's a common problem. One other thing to tie into lots of stress, I should have mentioned this on the lower control arms, but one of the issues I had, and it's this very common on almost all of the Toyota chassis, is what's called the cam tabs. So the cam tab on your lower control arm, in order to do the alignment, there's like a cam, and where the bolt is mounted is at a lower section. You turn that cam and it will ride against these little cam tabs on the frame, and that's what moves the control arm in or out to do your alignment. Well, those little tabs are, I would say, maybe 1/8 inch steel, if even. They're really thin, and over time, especially if you do a lot of wheeling with heavy tires or just a lot of alignments over time, those cam tabs will end up folding over. I would say 8 out of 10 people with a Lexus GX460 that wheel it have this problem. Same thing goes for Tacomas, same thing goes for 4Runners. I'm sure the Tundras and the Land Cruisers are the same way too. It is really common. There are a couple different aftermarket solutions for that. In my case, I went with a kit from KP Off-Road, but there's also kits from like Total Chaos. Marlin Crawler makes a really cool kit too. Really, the concept is you're either reinforcing those cam tabs or completely cutting them off the factory or off the frame and then welding on ones. The ones I have, you weld on, and they have like it's got to be like a 1/4 inch steel, maybe even 1/8 inch. I think it's 1/4 inch steel though. Super heavy, and now you don't have to worry about your alignment. With that said, like I mentioned, I went with the KP Off-Road cam tab gussets, but I also went with their alignment hardware. And what that replaces your typical OEM washer and bolt, it replaces it with an aftermarket, I think it's a grade, it was a heavy grade, so it was either, it might have been a grade 10.9 fastener and a nut, a locking nut, and it has like an octagonal shaped washer. So instead of rotating it with like a wrench, you actually have to select little notches. And what it does though is that once you lock your alignment in, you never have to worry about it again. And this is a common problem with Toyotas in general. I would say probably even independent suspension vehicles in general. Really common to Toyotas though. You get your alignment all dialed in for your large tires, all that stuff. You end up doing some wheeling trips, and then all of a sudden the vehicle is pulling one direction or whatever. It ends up knocking the alignment out a little bit. And by going with these cam tab adjusters, cam tab adjusters and the cam tab reinforcement plates, it locks in that alignment. So that was a problem I had. I would say that's kind of a self-inflicted problem, but I have even seen it on even factory vehicles that are higher in mileage. So keep an eye out on that. That's a common problem. One last note on that, if those are bent over, a lot of shops won't tell you. If they're a good shop, they will, but they won't tell you. They'll just get the alignment in, they'll lock in the bolts, and they'll be like, it's fine, because they got it all green on the screen. You may not know it, but your alignment's gonna be off side to side, and it may not be perfect. So just a last note on that. One other thing I wanted to mention, and this is like a real quick one, category, is electrical. Electrical, the only thing that I've had any issues with on this vehicle was the alternator. And this one was 100% self-inflicted. We got inspiration from Matt and Kara at Ozark Overland, and we did the Ozark Overland Adventure Trail down in Arkansas, and the trail is amazing. It's a little tough, but it's really fun. And we ended up plunging ourselves into a hole that, even though we checked it with sticks, was a little bit deeper than we thought. And in the process of backing out, luckily we didn't get stuck. It had a lot of silt and mud in that hole. And unfortunately, the design on the alternator, where they located it on this engine, is on the passenger side all the way at the bottom of the engine. So if you go through any water or mud holes, you are very, very likely to just suck all that into the alternator, which just obliterates the bushing or the bushes inside that, and it just blows the alternator. So I wouldn't say it's a common failure, but it can be a common failure if you do a lot of deep water crossings, especially stuff with like silty, muddy nastiness in it. You're gonna smoke your alternator. I know a lot of people that have. I also know people that are like, I've wheeled my entire life and never had an issue with an alternator. So just something to note, guys, if you do a lot of water crossings and that type of stuff, it's very easy to smoke that alternator. And unfortunately, the location on it is down at the very bottom of the engine, closest to the silt and the mud. So that was a problem, and it is not a fun job to do, especially on the side of the road. So yeah, keep an eye out on that one. Now, the last one I had is just some miscellaneous things. So this will be the miscellaneous category. Number one, and this was probably very common on the Lexus GX460, on the rear, very most, I guess you want to call it the trunk door or the barn door, there is a latch there that you lock and unlock with the vehicle. You squeeze the latch and it opens up the door. That latch is known to end up getting, like, it gets kind of rusted on the pin on the internal, and it will stick. The issue we had was that, one, it would be kind of hard to squeeze it. Even though it was unlocked, it'd be kind of hard to squeeze it. When you did, it would just stick open. So you couldn't get the door to close because the handle was like, stuck wide open. It'd be the same thing as, like, I don't know, say a car door, like if you had always had the latch engaged or something, it would just never close. So you had to kind of stick your fingers in there and try to unlatch it, and became a massive pain. I ended up buying an OEM replacement. I want to say it was like $200. It was kind of pricey. I waited for a deal. I get all my parts from a dealership in Arizona. They do a really good job with their pricing and their shipment and all that stuff. So I get all my parts from those guys, and I ordered an OEM one. It took me like 30 minutes to replace it. I was going to make a YouTube video on it, but it went so fast that I actually forgot to even make the video. Like, I had it done before I even remembered that I should make a video. But that is a super common problem on these. It was actually an issue even from when I bought it, and it just got worse over time. So that's a quick and easy one. Another common problem on this, and I think a lot of people don't even realize it's a problem until they look closer, is the weather stripping on the rear doors. So the two rear doors, your two rear passenger doors, the weather stripping can kind of come off of the metal pinch seam, I guess you want to call it. And what will happen is one of two things, really. One, if it's really kind of pulled off, you'll get like a weird like air noise or wind noise. And then two, if you wheel, you'll get like dust and stuff coming in. So what we ended up doing is we kept putting in the beginning, we used to just kind of push it back into place and kind of make sure it was all like aligned nice, and then close the door and it'd be okay. We ended up buying a 3M weather stripping adhesive, and ended up actually cleaning all that up and putting a little bit of adhesive in a few spots. I didn't want to like line the whole thing because I feel like it'd be tough to get off later, but I put it in some key areas that were problem areas, and we ended up having to do this on both sides. For whatever reason, that weather stripping just kind of shrinks over time or something, and it kind of just starts falling off the door, if that makes sense. Well, it's not the door, it's the frame of the vehicle that the door goes up against. So that was all the things we've had to replace on the vehicle, guys. I know it sounds like a long list, but it's really not that bad. And I guess at the end of the day, a lot of people ask, is the Lexus GX460 reliable? Yeah, absolutely. Really, like I said, in all these categories, you guys can go back through. There's a few common problems that will happen no matter what, but in overall, those are kind of small things that, you know, really only happen at high mileage. You do it once and you pretty much recycle that miles all over again. And the rest of it is kind of, if you're gonna be wheeling a vehicle, guys, and this goes for anything on the market, the more you modify a vehicle from the OEM spec, the more likely you are to have issues, either related to that problem or just downstream problems from adding a lot of weight or XYZ. So overall, guys, the vehicle's been really reliable. Now, if you have a Lexus GX460, I would love to hear what you've had to replace on yours. Throw some comments below, because I would really love to know what everybody else has had to replace on them. If you're looking to buy a Lexus GX460, let me know what you thought of this video. Was this, did this scare you away from buying one, or do you feel more informed before looking at buying one? I would love some comments below. Now, one last thing, if you guys can do me a favor, I have looked at my analytics and it appears only about 80% of you that watch this video, or I'm sorry, 20% of you that watch this video are actually subscribed. So please do me a favor, if you found this guys useful and you would like to see future videos on this channel, click that subscribe button, click that like button, click that notification bell, throw some comments below. You guys are awesome. We'll see you next time. Peace.